Hi everyone. Here are the extra logical fallacies for embedded honors. Remember that a fallacy is a bad argument. It's flawed logic, and that's why we're teaching them to you. Once you know them by name and can recognize them, it gets much harder for people to manipulate you by using them. Knowing these makes you harder to deceive or mislead. So that's our rationale. The first logical fallacy is the straw man, and it goes like this. Instead of arguing against an actual opponent, you argue against a weak version of that opponent that you yourself build, the way that you would build a scarecrow, a straw man. In other words, instead of fighting against a real man, you fight against a man that you built out of straw, a weaker opponent. You do this by putting words into the mouths of people on the other side and distorting or exaggerating their views. For example, let's say a mother is scolding her daughter for breaking curfew, and she says, "You got home an hour after curfew, and that's unacceptable." Let's say the daughter responds by saying, "Oh my God, just because I'm late, you think I'm out robbing convenience stores or something. You're ridiculous." But look again at what the mother actually said. Did she say her daughter was robbing convenience stores? She did not. The daughter put those words in her mother's mouth, making the mother seem ridiculous. She misrepresented her mother, creating a straw man version. The next fallacy is the bandwagon effect. The name comes from a trick that circus performers used to use to draw attention to the circus coming to town, where they would drive this big, colorful, noisy wagon through with a band and create a parade. So some of the people watching this would be actual townspeople watching a parade, and others were paid to be there to cheer and act super excited about the circus. And the other people would think, oh, these people are excited, so I should get excited too. And their mistake is thinking that an idea is more correct when it is more popular. And as we know, the popularity of an idea does not guarantee that it's a good idea. What were those rubber bands in the shape of animals and things that you all were wearing? Silly bands. Silly bands 3 years ago. Why did you think those were a good idea? Because people around you were acting like they were a good idea. When your parents say to you, "If your friends jumped off a bridge, would you do it too?" What they are accusing you of is the bandwagon fallacy. The third one is false dichotomy, also referred to as the black and white fallacy. This is where you pretend that a situation has only two extreme alternatives, when in fact the world is almost never that simple. You pretend it's black and white with no gray area in between. Now, when a waitress asks if you want soup or salad with your meal, that's not a false dichotomy, because the menu may actually give you just two options. It's a dichotomy, but not a false dichotomy. Here's one of my favorite examples from a false dichotomy from The Simpsons. It's from an episode where Homer builds this janky car and Marge protests, saying, "I don't want you driving around in a car you made." And Homer responds by saying, "You can sit complaining or you can knit me some seatbelts." When, of course, those really aren't the only two options that Marge has. Here's a more realistic example. A student says, "I couldn't bring myself to spend the whole weekend studying for my social studies test, so I decided to leave the schoolwork behind and go to Disneyland. We left right after school on Friday and got back late Sunday night." In fact, it did not have to be all or nothing. Surely there is some middle ground between studying the whole time and going to Disneyland and exhausting yourself. The next fallacy is called the no true Scotsman fallacy, and it comes from a story where, let's say I claim that no Scotsman puts sugar in his oatmeal. They say porridge, but that's just oatmeal. And you respond by saying, "My friend Angus is a Scotsman, and he likes to put sugar in his oatmeal." And then I say, "Well, no true Scotsman would ever put sugar in his oatmeal." So what's going on here? You have countered my original claim really effectively by giving a counterexample. And then I slide from talking about Scotsmen to talking about true Scotsmen. And this is the real problem. I get to decide who is and is not a true Scotsman. So I disqualify anybody who doesn't fit into my argument. In other words, when someone doesn't fit into my stereotype, I kick them out of their own group. The last fallacy is called switching necessity and sufficiency. The word necessity is related to the word necessary, and it means something that's needed. The word sufficient means enough or all you need. And the fallacy is when someone says, you need to do this, and you hear, that's all you need to do. That's the only thing you need to do. So say, for example, a coach says, you need to be on time for tryouts in order to make the team. The fallacy is that he's not saying that's sufficient. He's not saying that that's all you need to do is be on time. If the player thinks, I'm on time, I'm in, that's switching necessity and sufficient. Let me give you another example. A student says, my teacher said in order to get an A in this class, you need to turn in the homework. Well, I turned in the homework, and then he didn't give me an A. He totally went back on his word. Here's what's going on. The teacher is saying that the homework is needed, is necessary, but the teacher is not saying that that's the only thing that's needed. You also have to, I imagine, do well in the papers and the tests. But the student hears, in order to get an A in the class, all you need to do is the homework. So the student is thinking that something that's actually necessary is in fact sufficient. Okay, that's it.